When I first decided to learn English, I was full of excitement and determination. I had always admired people who could speak fluently, and I wanted to be like them. However, I had no idea how challenging it would be. Every time I tried to speak, I felt nervous and forgot the words I had just learned. My confidence was low, but I knew I couldn't give up. I told myself that every expert was once a beginner. In the beginning, I started with simple words and phrases. I bought a notebook and wrote down everything I learned. I practiced saying hello, thank you, and goodbye every day. It felt good to make small progress, but I wanted to learn faster. I looked for online resources and downloaded apps to help me. Even though I was trying hard, it still felt like I was far from my goal. One of the hardest parts was understanding native speakers. They talked so fast that I couldn't catch most of the words. Watching English movies and listening to songs helped a little, but it was frustrating. Sometimes I felt like giving up. I would ask myself, why is this so hard? But deep down, I knew that I just needed to keep going. My family and friends encouraged me to keep practicing. They reminded me of the importance of learning English for my future. I started setting small goals for myself, like learning 10 new words every week. These goals helped me stay focused and motivated. I realized that learning a language is a process, not something that happens overnight. Looking back, those early days were tough, but they taught me the value of persistence. I knew that if I wanted to succeed, I had to be patient and consistent. This was only the beginning of my journey, and I was ready to face the challenges ahead. Chapter 2: The Struggle to Improve. As I continued my journey, I started attending English classes. At first, I was shy and afraid to participate. I didn't want to make mistakes in front of others. But I quickly realized that making mistakes was part of the learning process. My teacher always said, "Mistakes are proof that you're trying." Those words stayed with me and gave me courage. In class, we practiced speaking, reading, and writing. I love the reading exercises because they help me understand new vocabulary. Writing was also helpful, but speaking was still my biggest challenge. I often felt embarrassed when I couldn't pronounce words correctly. Sometimes my classmates laughed, but my teacher always encouraged me to keep trying. Outside of class, I tried to immerse myself in the language. I changed the settings on my phone to English and started following English-speaking influencers on social media. I also began keeping a journal in English where I wrote about my daily experiences. These small steps helped me feel more connected to the language. Despite my efforts, there were days when I felt stuck. I struggled to remember grammar rules and often mixed up tenses. It was frustrating, but I reminded myself of my progress. Every time I felt discouraged, I looked back at my journal to see how far I had come. This gave me the motivation to keep going. By the end of this phase, I had made noticeable improvements. I could introduce myself and hold basic conversations. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I knew that learning a language was like climbing a mountain. Each step brought me closer to the top. Chapter 3: Facing Frustration. The more I tried to improve, the more I realized how much I didn't know. Every time I learned a new grammar rule, I discovered another one that confused me. The irregular verbs, prepositions, and phrasal verbs were especially tricky. It felt like there was no end to the challenges. One day, during an online conversation practice session, I completely froze. I couldn't think of the right words, and I felt so embarrassed. After the session, I cried and thought about quitting. But then I remembered why I had started this journey. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. To overcome my frustration, I decided to change my approach. Instead of focusing on perfection, I focused on progress. I celebrated small victories, like understanding a sentence in a movie or writing a paragraph without help. I reminded myself that every step, no matter how small, was a step forward. I also started talking to myself in English. It felt silly at first, but it helped me practice forming sentences. I described my day, my plans, and even my thoughts out loud. Slowly, I became more comfortable with the language. By the end of this period, I realized that frustration was a normal part of learning. It wasn't a sign of failure. It was a sign that I was pushing myself. I knew that if I kept going, I would eventually overcome these challenges. Chapter 4: Finding Confidence. After months of hard work, I started to see real progress. I could watch simple English videos and understand most of what was being said. My vocabulary had grown, and I felt more confident in my speaking abilities. For the first time, I believed that I could become fluent. One day, I had a conversation with a tourist in my city. At first, I was nervous, but as we talked, I realized that I could communicate effectively. The tourist understood me, and I understood them. It was a proud moment that boosted my confidence. To continue improving, I joined an online community of English learners. We practiced speaking together and shared tips and resources. It was inspiring to see others working towards the same goal. Their encouragement kept me motivated, and I felt less alone in my journey. I also started reading books in English. At first, I chose children's books because they were easier to understand. Over time, I moved on to more challenging material. Reading not only improved my vocabulary, but also helped me see how sentences were structured. These experiences showed me that learning a language is about building connections. It's not just about grammar and vocabulary. It's about using the language to connect with others and express yourself. Chapter 5: A Lifelong Journey. Today, I feel proud of how far I've come, but I know my journey isn't over. Learning English has taught me patience, perseverance, and the importance of believing in myself. It's not just about the destination. It's about the growth and lessons along the way. I still face challenges, especially with advanced grammar and idiomatic expressions. But I now see these challenges as opportunities to learn. I know that every mistake is a chance to improve, and every conversation is a step closer to fluency. Looking back, I'm grateful for the struggles I faced. They made me stronger and more determined. I've learned that progress is more important than perfection, and that consistency is key. As I continue my journey, I'm excited about the possibilities that learning English will bring. I can now communicate with people from different countries, understand new cultures, and access a world of information. My story isn't just about learning a language. It's about believing in myself and never giving up. And if I can do it, I believe anyone can. Chapter 6: Overcoming Fear of Speaking. One of the biggest challenges I faced was speaking English in real-life situations. Even though I practiced a lot at home, I often froze when I had to talk to someone face-to-face. My mind would go blank, and I would forget the words I wanted to say. This fear held me back for a long time, and it made me doubt my abilities. But deep down, I knew that the only way to improve was to face my fear and practice speaking as much as possible. To overcome this, I started small. I practiced ordering food at restaurants and asking for directions on the street. At first, I felt embarrassed when I made mistakes, but I quickly realized that most people were kind and patient. They didn't care if my English wasn't perfect. They were just happy that I was trying. These small interactions gave me the courage to speak more often and in more challenging situations. I also joined a local language exchange group where I met people who wanted to learn my native language. In exchange, they helped me practice English. These meetings were incredibly helpful because they provided a safe space to make mistakes and learn from them. The more I practiced, the more confident I became. Slowly but surely, speaking English started to feel natural. Another strategy that helped me was recording myself speaking. I would choose a topic and talk about it for a few minutes, then listen to the recording to identify areas for improvement. This exercise not only improved my pronunciation, but also helped me become more aware of my speaking habits. Over time, I noticed significant progress, and I felt proud of how far I had come. By the end of this phase, I had overcome my fear of speaking. I wasn't fluent yet, but I was no longer afraid to try. I realized that confidence comes from action, not perfection. Every conversation was an opportunity to learn and grow, and I was determined to make the most of every moment. Chapter 7: The Power of Consistency. One of the most important lessons I learned during my journey was the power of consistency. At the beginning, I often felt overwhelmed by the amount of work it took to learn English. Here were so many grammar rules, vocabulary words, and pronunciation tips to remember that I didn't know where to start. But I soon realized that learning a language is not about doing everything at once. It's about taking small, consistent steps every day. I created a daily routine that helped me stay on track. Every morning, I spent 30 minutes reviewing vocabulary and practicing pronunciation. In the afternoon, I watched an English video or listened to a podcast. At night, I wrote in my English journal to reflect on what I had learned that day. This routine became a habit, and it kept me focused and motivated even on days when I felt tired or discouraged. One of the hardest parts of staying consistent was dealing with setbacks. There were times when I felt like I wasn't making any progress, and I wondered if all my effort was worth it. But I reminded myself that progress is not always visible in the short term. I trusted the process and kept going, knowing that every small step brought me closer to my goal. Another key to consistency was setting realistic goals. Instead of trying to learn hundreds of words in a week, I focused on mastering 10 new words each day. These small, achievable goals kept me motivated and gave me a sense of accomplishment. Over time, these little victories added up to big results. Looking back, I realized that consistency was the secret to my success. It wasn't about working harder. It was about working smarter and showing up every day. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint, and I was proud of the progress I had made by staying consistent. Chapter 8: Embracing Mistakes. One of the most transformative moments in my journey was learning to embrace mistakes. In the beginning, I was terrified of making errors. I avoided speaking in public and hesitated to write essays because I didn't want to be judged. But over time, I realized that mistakes are not something to fear. They are opportunities to learn and grow. This shift in mindset happened during a conversation with a friend who was also learning English. We were practicing together, and I made a lot of errors while trying to explain my thoughts. Instead of laughing at me, my friend encouraged me and said, "You're doing great. Every mistake you make is one step closer to improvement." Those words stayed with me, and they changed the way I approach learning. From that day forward, I stopped being afraid of mistakes. I spoke freely, even if my grammar wasn't perfect. I wrote essays without worrying about whether every sentence was correct. I even started asking for feedback from my teachers and peers. Their constructive criticism helped me identify my weaknesses and turn them into strengths. One strategy that helped me embrace mistakes was keeping a mistake journal. Every time I made an error, I wrote it down along with the correct version. Reviewing this journal regularly helped me avoid repeating the same mistakes and showed me how much I had improved over time. By embracing mistakes, I became more confident and resilient. I stopped seeing errors as failures and started seeing them as stepping stones to success. This change in perspective made learning English more enjoyable and less stressful, and it helped me progress faster than ever before. Chapter 9: Discovering My Strengths. As I continued my journey, I began to discover my strengths as a language learner. For a long time, I focused on my weaknesses, such as my poor pronunciation and limited vocabulary. But one day, I realized that I also had strengths that I could build on. Recognizing these strengths gave me a new sense of confidence and motivation. One of my strengths was my ability to memorize vocabulary quickly. I used flashcards and spaced repetition apps to learn new words, and I enjoyed the challenge of expanding my vocabulary. I also discovered that I had a good ear for accents. By listening carefully to native speakers, I was able to mimic their pronunciation and improve my speaking skills. Another strength was my determination. No matter how difficult things got, I never gave up. I was willing to put in the time and effort needed to achieve my goals. This perseverance helped me overcome challenges that might have discouraged others. Recognizing my strengths also helped me choose the right learning methods. For example, I realized that I learn best through interactive activities, like conversations and role-playing exercises. These methods were not only effective but also fun, which made the learning process more enjoyable. By focusing on my strengths, I was able to make faster progress and build my confidence. I learned that everyone has unique talents and abilities, and the key to success is using those strengths to your advantage. Chapter 10: A New Beginning. After months of hard work, I finally reached a point where I felt comfortable using English in everyday situations. I could hold conversations, understand movies, and even write essays with ease. But I knew that this was not the end of my journey. It was a new beginning. Learning a language is a lifelong process, and there is always more to learn. I set new goals for myself, such as improving my writing skills and expanding my knowledge of idiomatic expressions. I also decided to take an advanced English course to challenge myself further. These new goals kept me motivated and excited about the future. One of the most rewarding parts of my journey was being able to help others. I started volunteering as a language tutor for beginners, sharing my experiences and tips with them. Helping others not only reinforced my own knowledge, but also gave me a sense of fulfillment and purpose. As I reflect on my journey, I am grateful for the lessons I've learned along the way. Learning English has not only opened doors for me professionally, but also enriched my life in countless ways. It has taught me the value of perseverance, the importance of embracing mistakes, and the joy of connecting with people from different cultures. This journey has been one of the most challenging and rewarding experiences of my life. I am proud of how far I've come, and I am excited about where this new beginning will take me. The possibilities are endless, and I am ready to embrace them with an open heart and a curious mind. Chapter 11: The Challenge of Advanced Grammar. As my English skills improved, I started tackling advanced grammar, which was far more complicated than I had anticipated. Concepts like conditional sentences, subjunctive moods, and modal verbs left me feeling overwhelmed at times. I often questioned whether I would ever truly understand how to use them correctly in both writing and speaking. Despite the difficulty, I knew that mastering grammar was essential for expressing my thoughts clearly and accurately, so I took the challenge head on. To make progress, I turned to a combination of resources, including grammar textbooks, online tutorials, and even language apps that offered interactive exercises. These tools helped me break down complex rules into smaller, more manageable pieces. For example, I spent an entire week focusing on conditional sentences, creating scenarios, and practicing how to form each type. Although the process was slow, it helped solidify my understanding step by step. One of the hardest parts of learning advanced grammar was applying it in real-life situations. It's one thing to understand the rules on paper, but it's entirely different to use them naturally in conversation. To overcome this, I practiced writing short stories and essays, making sure to include the grammar concepts I had learned. I also joined an online language exchange group where I could test my skills by chatting with native speakers. They kindly corrected my mistakes and explained how to improve, which was invaluable. Another helpful strategy was immersing myself in English media. Watching TV shows and movies, especially ones with complex dialogue, exposed me to how grammar rules were used in context. I started noticing patterns and phrases that I could adopt in my own speech. Little by little, I began to see the connections between what I was learning and how native speakers communicated. By the end of this phase, I felt more confident in my grammar skills. While I knew I still had a lot to learn, I was proud of the progress I had made. Advanced grammar no longer felt like an insurmountable obstacle, but rather a tool that I could use to express myself more effectively. This achievement marked another milestone in my journey toward fluency. Chapter 12, Building Listening Comprehension. One of the most rewarding yet challenging aspects of learning English was developing my listening comprehension. At the start of my journey, understanding spoken English felt almost impossible. Native speakers talked so quickly, and their accents and slang often left me completely lost. I knew that improving my listening skills was essential for real communication, so I dedicated myself to mastering this aspect of the language. I began by listening to simple, slow-paced audio materials, such as beginner-level podcasts and audiobooks. These resources allowed me to focus on individual words and phrases without feeling overwhelmed. As my confidence grew, I gradually moved on to more challenging content, like news broadcasts and interviews. Although it was difficult at first, I found that repetition and consistency made a big difference. Listening every day helped me tune my ears to the rhythm and sounds of English. To take my practice to the next level, I started watching movies and TV shows with subtitles. This strategy allowed me to connect spoken words with their written forms, making it easier to understand what was being said. Over time, I transitioned to watching without subtitles, which forced me to rely entirely on my listening skills. It was a challenging step, but it pushed me out of my comfort zone and helped me improve much faster. Another effective technique was shadowing. I would play a short clip of a conversation, pause it, and then repeat what I heard as closely as possible. This exercise not only improved my listening, but also helped me practice pronunciation and intonation. Shadowing became one of my favorite ways to learn because it was both challenging and fun. After months of dedicated practice, I noticed a significant improvement in my listening comprehension. I could understand most conversations and even pick up on subtle nuances in tone and meaning. This newfound ability opened up a whole new world of opportunities for me, from enjoying English music and movies to having meaningful conversations with native speakers. Chapter 13, Expanding My Vocabulary. As I advanced in my English journey, I realized that expanding my vocabulary was crucial for expressing myself more precisely. While I already knew many basic words and phrases, I often struggled to find the right words to convey my thoughts in more complex situations. This limitation motivated me to focus on learning new vocabulary every day, turning it into a core part of my routine. I started by creating a vocabulary notebook where I wrote down every new word I encountered, along with its meaning, pronunciation, and an example sentence. I reviewed these notes regularly, using flashcards to test myself on the words I had learned. This method was incredibly effective, as it helped me retain new words and use them confidently in both writing and speaking. Reading played a huge role in building my vocabulary. I began with simple books and articles before moving on to more advanced texts, such as novels and academic papers. Whenever I came across an unfamiliar word, I made a point to look it up and understand its context. Over time, this habit not only expanded my vocabulary, but also improved my comprehension skills. Another strategy that worked well for me was grouping words by themes, such as travel, work, or emotions. By learning related words together, I found it easier to remember them and use them in appropriate contexts. For example, when studying travel vocabulary, I learned words like itinerary, landmark, and customs all at once. This thematic approach made learning more organized and enjoyable. By the end of this phase, I had significantly broadened my vocabulary. I felt more confident expressing myself in a variety of situations, whether it was discussing a complex topic or simply chatting with friends. Expanding my vocabulary not only improved my communication skills, but also deepened my understanding of the language as a whole. Chapter 14: Achieving Pronunciation Clarity. Improving my pronunciation was one of the most rewarding yet difficult aspects of learning English. At the start, my accent was strong, and my pronunciation was often unclear, which made it hard for others to understand me. However, I was determined to sound as natural as possible, so I dedicated myself to mastering this skill. I began by focusing on the sounds that were most challenging for me, such as TH, R, and V. I watched videos that demonstrated how to position my tongue and lips correctly, then practiced these sounds repeatedly until they felt more natural. This process required a lot of patience, but it was worth it to hear the improvement in my speech. Listening to native speakers was another crucial part of my pronunciation practice. I paid close attention to how they pronounced words and imitated their intonation, rhythm, and stress patterns. Mimicking their speech helped me sound more fluent and less robotic. I also recorded myself speaking and compared my pronunciation to the original recordings, identifying areas where I could improve. Tongue twisters became one of my favorite exercises. They were not only fun, but also great for practicing difficult sounds and improving clarity. Phrases like, "She sells seashells by the seashore," and "How can a clam cram in a clean cream can?" challenged me to articulate each word clearly and quickly. After months of consistent practice, my pronunciation improved dramatically. While I still had a slight accent, it no longer interfered with communication. People could understand me easily, and I felt more confident speaking in public. Achieving clarity in my pronunciation was a major milestone that brought me one step closer to fluency. Chapter 15. The Journey Continues. Reaching a high level of proficiency in English felt like a dream come true, but I knew that my journey wasn't over. Language learning is a lifelong process, and there is always room for improvement. I set new goals for myself, such as mastering idioms, refining my writing style, and exploring regional accents and slang. These goals kept me motivated and excited about continuing my learning journey. One of my biggest aspirations was to achieve fluency in professional contexts. I wanted to be able to write reports, give presentations, and participate in meetings with ease. To prepare for this, I enrolled in an advanced business English course that focused on communication skills for the workplace. This course challenged me to think critically and express myself more clearly and confidently. Traveling became another important part of my learning journey. Visiting English-speaking countries gave me the opportunity to immerse myself in the language and culture. Each trip provided valuable experiences, from navigating airports and public transportation to making new friends and learning about different customs. These real-world experiences were some of the best teachers I could have asked for. Looking back, I am amazed at how far I have come since I first started learning English. The journey has been filled with challenges, but it has also been incredibly rewarding. Every mistake I made, every fear I overcame, and every small victory I celebrated brought me closer to my goal. Now, I see myself not just as a language learner, but as someone who can inspire others to achieve their dreams. My journey has shown me that with determination, patience, and the right strategies, anything is possible. The road ahead is still full of opportunities, and I am excited to see where it will lead me next.